everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com, and today I'm back with Kristine Kathryn Rusch. Hi, Kris.
Hi, Joanna.
It's great to have you back on the show. It's actually been almost exactly a year, so it's very cool to have you back.
Thank you. Yeah, I noticed that on the Skype little notification. It said it's been a year, and I'm like, wow.
I
Seems
know.
like it's been that long.
Exactly. Well, just a little introduction if people haven't heard of Kris. Kris is an international best-selling and multi-award-winning author of so many books in so many genres under many, many names. And it's really hard to encompass everything Kris writes. She's a mentor to me, a creative mentor through her books and workshops, which I've been to in person and taken online. And she's also an award-winning editor, and her weekly Business Rush blog posts are essential reading for indies. And I just tweet them as soon as they come out.
And I appreciate that.
Oh, they're always amazing. Now, Kris's latest book, which this book is so interesting. It's called Creating Your Author Brand. And we're going to talk about this today because I think people have in their heads one idea of brand. But Kris, let's start. Why is it important to think about branding wherever you are in your career, whether you're starting out or whether you've written as many books as you have?
Well, let's back up for just a minute and talk about the fact that we are talking about the business side of publishing, not the creative side. And so don't think about branding at all while you're creating. Just write what you want to write and then worry about it. Now, after that, then you need to think about how people approach books, and you need to think about it from a reader's perspective. You're a commercial artist, and commercial stuff, people buy it in commercial venues. So you need to be commercial, and part of being commercial is a brand. Now, for authors, what you really want is your brand to be your name, so that they know when they pick up a Kristine Kathryn Rusch book or a Joanna Penn book that they're going to get a certain kind of book or a certain kind of voice. So that doesn't mean you have to write the same thing over and over again. And in fact, a lot of writers don't, but people appreciate their voice. I think of Stephen King. Everybody thinks he's a horror writer, but he's not. He's a mystery writer. He's a horror writer. He's written some mainstream novels. He's written some nonfiction, but his voice is always there. And when you're getting Stephen King, you're going to get kind of an unflinching look at life with that kind of wry Maine voice in it. And that's the brand you go for. It's going to be hard for you to figure out who you are as a writer, as a brand. So ask your readers, ask people why they pick you up, or just lurk on your reviews and they'll tell you. They'll say, I pick up Joanna's books because they do X, or I love the adventure, or because she's really good at this. Even now, I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I occasionally see something and it says, Rusch is really great at this. And I'm like, who knew I did that? I didn't know that. Wow, okay. And I just kind of put it in the mental marketing file, not in the writing file, because I'm just writing for me. So I really want to be clear on that. The whole thing we're going to be talking about today is the business part, because otherwise you're really going to freak out. The place people make mistakes is they think they're going to have to write the same thing over and over and over again, and that's the brand. The brand is a multi-layered part of what you do in marketing. It's your name. If you're writing in a series, the series has its own brand. Each book has its own brand. Each genre has its own brand. And you've got to think about all of that as you're putting it together. And I'm just talking about covers now. There's other aspects to branding that go along with it, and, who you're branding for and who you're writing for and all of that. And I'm sure we'll get into that today.
Yeah, and I think already, for people on the video, it's not. I was kind of thinking that this would be a short book. Actually, it's longer. It's longer than expected because that was a surprise to me. And I wanted to ask you about that, because I think you'll start writing on a topic on your blog and then you'll realize there's a lot more to say than expected. So why did this turn into such a big project? Is it because authors just don't have a clue about all the different things? Like, how did it become such a big thing?
It became really big when I wrote a blog post and I said, you guys are doing branding wrong, because something set me off, and it's been a year now, so I don't know. All my books come from blog posts from the weekly business blog. And so I wrote this post, and I got questions in email and in the comments that basically said, "Oh, what's this? What's that? What's this?" And each person had a different thing that they were asking what about. And I realized, oh, I know more about this than I thought I did. And where I thought people were at a basic level, I was actually speaking to the intermediate or advanced level, and they don't even know the true basics of it. And, I've been in business. I own a lot of businesses, not just writing businesses. And I've had retail businesses, gosh, since I was in like 20. So this stuff is kind of hard baked into me. And I used to work in advertising, and I didn't realize how hard baked the branding part of it was until I started getting these. Wait a minute, I don't even understand what you mean by whatever. And each chapter in that book is one of those questions. I just wrote them down and went, okay. And then as I started writing it, and I realized, I try to keep the blogs, which are too long. Everybody says they're too long. You should have 500-word blogs, and I have 3,000
I love
word
them.
blogs.
I love them.
I know, but they're kind of an adventure, and I can try not to go past 3,000 words. So I get to 3,000 words and realize, that was just the introduction to that topic. Oh crap, I've got to do more. And I do, and then so I have like this part of the blog, part 1, part 2, part 3, and I put them together in a single chapter under a single heading. But sometimes they were a month's worth of blogs, weekly blogs, just to get that one topic.
Yeah, I think that's why I was surprised. I thought I understood branding. I really did. Then I was like, oh, okay, this is a lot bigger. So let's come back to the author name, because I think everyone gets that an author name can be a brand. So like J.K. Rowling, Kristine Kathryn Rusch is a brand, but you have loads and loads of names, and part of that comes from traditional publishing and writing under, for a long time under different names. But this is the biggest thing I think is an issue, is this difference between names. Should you have different names? Should you have different genres? How does that work with the kind of big data, also bought algorithm stuff? So could you break down what is in an author name brand, I guess, and what are the important aspects there?
Well, first of all, it's personal what you decide to do, whether or not you want to have, an author brand and have it be all encompassing, or if you want to have it, broken down into subgenres or something. Now, if you're doing wildly diverse things like writing for 3-year-olds and middle grade and writing erotica, have different names. I mean, it's too dangerous. It would get you kicked off of platforms and other things. So, be sensible on that. But if you're writing erotica and, soft romance, sweet romance, then you may or may not, you want to do something different with your covers and keep the same name so that your readers know, oh, that particular series, I don't like it because it's erotica and I only read sweet. And if you only write, vice versa. But that's a personal choice. For me, some of it I was forced into because, as you said, traditional publishing, I've had this very long career. And I had a mystery name, Kris Nelscott, which is established. And I had a romance name, Kristine Grayson, which is established. And I'll be really honest, it's annoying because I have all of this old work that needs to come out. And I could put it all under Rusch, but there are a lot of people who only like those names and only go to those names. And so the annoying part is I have to build each one of those in the indie world in its own way. And then I find myself, if I wrote a mystery novel and it's about some of the issues that Kris Nelscott deals with, but it's set in a different time period, or is it a Kris Nelscott book, or is it a Kristine Kathryn Rusch book? And that's me looking at it from after I've been creative. Then I look at it and go, which is it? And it's hard. There are times when I'm doing like, when J.D. Robbins and Nora Roberts wrote a book together. I mean, she's the same person, but it's kind of one of those cross author things, but it's me. I don't know. How do I market that? It gets confusing. And I, if I had it to do all over again, I'd still keep Kris Nelscott separate, but I don't know about Kristine Grayson. She falls pretty much in the Rusch categories, but I'm stuck with it. And some of you who are listening to this are stuck because you've been traditionally published or you've already made the choice. So, honor your fans. Don't switch and go, oh, well, never mind. That name is dead. Honor your fans. There are readers who only read that name. So, let them have their name.
It's interesting. I have noticed, like, I just picked up a book the other week called The Hell Candidate by Graham Masterton. And then I realized it was Open Road Media. That was published in the 70s under a name that he had written under back then. And they had re-released it under Graham Masterton, which is the name he's known as now. So is that a possibility for people who have got their rights back, for example?
Absolutely. But a lot of, like with that particular name for Graham Masterson, it was a dead pen name. It didn't have a living, breathing fan base. So he could easily do that. Yeah, I've done that. I have a couple of dead pen names and I've moved them over to Rusch, and that's fine. But with the existing pen name, that's a different story.
You mentioned voice, and that to me is the voice in the series branding thing. To me, in my head, becomes difficult. In that, what you say about the voice being kind of consistent across genre, and yet you still have fans who like different series. So how do we bring the promise, I guess branding as a promise to the reader in some form, how do we do the promise with a voice but offer different genres? Or how do we, not different series, I guess?
It's really simple. Your voice is your voice. Your perspective is your perspective. It seems really normal to you because you grew up with it. I mean, that's how you see the world. And the way everybody else sees the world is weird because they're not you. So that voice is baked into you. That is who you are. Mm-hmm. And so you will put that voice, no matter what you write, into what you write. It will be there. It's not something you layer on. It's not something you can add. It is essential you, and it's right there. You don't have to worry about it. It's just going to be there. So that part is fine. You're telling a different story, and when you're in a different genre, you may have a different tone, you may have used different words, you may not have as flowery a language, but it's still going to have that essential you. And the really tough part about that kind of voice, you're not going to recognize it. It's you. It's how you see the world. So my husband is Dean Wesley Smith, and he's my first reader, and he gets really happy when I say, oh, this book is so boring. It doesn't have anything in it. It's so normal. And he's like, oh, good. That's going to be a really powerful book. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, to you, it's like, that's the way the world is. And to me, it's like, wow, this is going to be really strong. And he's usually right, but it's annoying.
That's awesome. He was actually, because I do your courses obviously, and you both, I'm sure you don't watch him talking about his course, and sometimes he talks about your books, and it's really interesting to get the perspective of someone who loves you but obviously loves your writing as well as a first reader. And he was talking about that and how the voice was so important. Sorry, come back on the series then. How is series different in terms of branding, apart from covers obviously?
Well, a series has its own layers. It has its own fans. It has its own true fans. And then it has the people you want to bring in. And so with the series, you're going to need to have the genre correct. You're going to need to understand where it fits. You're going to understand what people want or don't want in that particular series. Not that you're writing for them, but when you're marketing, like the large book I'm finishing right now, is not using my regular characters in my series. So I know when I'm branding it and when I'm marketing it, I'm going to have to let the true readers know, hey, this is a different product. It's in the world, but it's not with the main characters. And then I have to let brand new readers know, hey, this is an entry book. You can come in, even though it's book 85 of the series. It's not 85, but it feels like 85 because I've been working on this forever. Even though it's a book deep in the series, you can start here, because there's nothing you need to know from the entire series. And so that's part of branding. That's part of marketing. We'll do some different stuff. We'll do some different advertising that way. And yet we want to make sure that when the readers come to the other books, they can look at them and go, oh, this series looks different with covers. The marketing stuff on the back is different. The advertising stuff that we do is different. Just the font, the way that we deal with it, the interiors, everything is different from, say, my Retrieval Artist series, also science fiction, but it's not at all the same in tone or in scope or anything else.
I was really interested there. You mentioned entry book. So do you already have, I know you haven't started marketing this book yet because it's not at that stage, but because that to me is really important because like, I feel like I have to have become a better writer since that first book. And now I've got lots in a series and I would really like an entry book again. I feel like everyone is an entry book. How are you showing that is an entry book apart from just saying you can read this as a new one?
We promote it differently. We promote it, have you always wanted to go into Kristine Kathryn Rusch's diving universe? If you have, this is a book to come in with. We're doing that right now. I've got a book called The Falls, which is an entry book into the diving universe. And it's in a story bundle, which is storybundle.com. You guys, you can get it for, $15, all that stuff. But it's an entry book. Because again, it doesn't use the regular characters. It's kind of a murder mystery set in this big, wide space opera kind of world. And it's different. And it's got a slightly different look. It's got some different, we're doing different promotion on it than we would do. Like, the book I have with diving that's coming out in the fall is called Searching for the Fleet. Now that has the regular characters and it'll actually be the advertising, the branding, all of that stuff is going to be geared to the fans. Did you want to know what happened to Coop and Yash on this particular day? Did you want to know what they're doing? The title itself, Searching for the Fleet. The fans who have read the series know, oh my goodness, we're finally to that part. But the people who've never read it before would be like, I don't know what that means. So it's a whole different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
I hope that answered you.
Yeah, it does. I'd never heard it called an entry book before. So even though, I should have heard that because I that just clicked with me. So, but coming back to branding, one of the things that I think people get confused about is they think it means a logo. So either a logo for their author website or a logo for an imprint. Is it at all important to have some kind of logo? Like you have a logo for WMG, but is there such a thing really for just an individual author?
Sure, you can have that. It's all what branding is about is consistency. So you have to make some decisions, and you decide based on, first of all, you have to write down all the things that you can brand. Your name, your series, if you have one, the genres that you're working in, the books that you're doing, all of those things. And you write that all down and then you figure it out. And then each one should have a slightly different look to it. And that should be, your author name should be kind of consistent on all of those things, but in a different font, and a different logo. Your marketing will be different. And each one, you spend time thinking about how that works and you break it all down. It's not just one thing. Branding is essentially everything in marketing. It is what it's all about. If you're not consistent from the top down, then you don't have, you're not doing it right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's funny, it reminded me, I don't know who said it, but someone's like, everyone has a brand, you might not know it. Like if you haven't created the brand, other people are going to create it in their mind for you.
Yeah. Well, they'll do that anyway. And here's what traditional published writers who started out or had a publisher for a while or had hired a cover artist without giving them any direction. That's what indies do. They don't give them any direction. That person has created your brand. And the thing that irritates me the most as a reader is that traditional publishing houses don't think about branding anymore because they've lost the sense of marketing 100 years ago. And so, if you look at, well, they're doing it right on Stephen King now, but if you look at somebody who's had a long-term career and it's not a big career like Stephen King, it's just somebody that has been around for a long time, all of their books look different. All of their series look different. Somewhere in the middle, some new editor comes in and goes, oh, these don't look very good anymore. So they switch in the middle of the series and they make it look different than the previous books in the series. And that confuses readers because what you're talking about is buying habits, and you want people to catch, if they're in a store, let's just talk about store for a minute, as they're walking by, you want their eye to catch that familiar shape that it's slightly different, the familiar font or the familiar, and they go, oh, look, it's the new Joanna Penn book. Oh my gosh. And they pick it up. You want on Amazon, you want them to be able to look at the books displayed and know that that's another book in the same series, as opposed to an older version of the same book or a German version of that book. with a different cover. You don't want them to spend a lot of time digging around, rooting through your backlist, going, does this book fit? Do I already have this book? Where does it go? You want to be really clear and consistent.
Yeah, that word consistency. It's so funny because I feel like you talked about voice being something that just happens, as part of who you are, and that consistency I think does almost change as you get interested in other things as a writer and you kind of move into different things. I wonder how much that consistency is there. And you have talked a bit there about readers and loyalty. So apart from consistent branding and I guess consistent delivery of story, what are some of the ways we can encourage readers' loyalty to a brand?
Well, you have to tell them a good story. I mean, that's the bottom line. I know you said besides, but that's not a besides. That's the important thing. They're going to be loyal to you if you tell them a good story. And readers are used to being kicked around by traditional publishing. They really are. They have to figure out, whose book is what. And if you make it easy for them, that really helps. The thing you have to realize as a writer is that you're never going to have the same number of readers from book to book. And you will grow your readership, but you will also lose your readership. And you will lose readership because they didn't know that the book came out, or because somebody got ill, or they died, or they had an income, they lost their job. So now they're going to the library to get your book. They're still reading you, or they're borrowing their friend's copy, but they're not picking up the book anymore. Mm-hmm. And so, your readership, if you only write for the same group of readers, your readership will go down. So you constantly have to bring in new readers and entertain them and give them entryways in and make it interesting on the writing side, and also make it inviting on the marketing side so that it doesn't look so daunting. Honestly, I don't like Amazon's decision to take whenever you have a book and they say, oh, it's book 85 in the series, because it may be an entry book and people are going to say book 85 in the series. And that's Amazon's decision. That's not our decision. We can't stop that. And so, now again, we're having algorithms and other stuff get in our way. And so we're going to have to kind of fight that, or in our own ways, and figure out how to do that in branding or in our own marketing. Mm. And, when you're doing marketing on branding and with your series or with your name, it should look the same. Think about movie marketing. Hollywood and the movie people are really good at this. You see a book that's related to the movie. It has the cover art, the poster art. You see the ads. They're very consistent. The fonts are very consistent. You go to the movie and you go sit in the movie and you see that the same fonts that were in the ad were in the movie. It's just straight down the road. If you get tchotchkes that they give away, like towels or something, it looks like it belongs as part of what they're doing. It's all consistent. And that's really what you want to be doing, system.
Yeah.
Top to bottom.
Yeah, and I know, I've only been doing this a few years really. And yet when I think about, having to kind of go back, I know for some people it's a big thing, right? To kind of look back at things. How many books you guys have? 400 or something?
I don't know how many books I have, but somebody told me, Allison Longuera, who runs WMG, told me I had 400 short stories. And I know that's true because I put up a short story for free every week, and for 4 years, so it must be more than that. I didn't repeat a story.
Wow. It's so interesting. So then the one thing that I really struggle with, because I write in lots of different genres like you do, it's this tagline thing. The tagline I find so I really wish I could come up with a tagline, and you have some great ideas about how to do this, but it seems like you struggle as well. I
can do your tagline. But see, for me, when I'm writing these big books, they're big books, and they're like, I'm lost in them, and I'm gone. And so I work with other people to get the taglines done. And to try to figure out where the book, after they've read it, what is it? Is it, a murder mystery in space? Is it a funny, heartwarming little romance? And then you come up with the tagline, and it takes some work, and you got to refine it. And, every now and then I've pulled it from We tell people not to read their reviews, but I have other people read reviews for me and then look, and sometimes there are really good lines from there. They're saying, oh, it's a great such and so here. And then you can take that and tweak it. I had a terrible review on the very first retrieval artist novel out of a magazine in the science fiction field, which was very influential at the time, called Locust. And they called it a cross between a Steven Spielberg movie and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And
sounds great.
I went, why is that an insult? Because they meant it as an insult, and I've used it ever since. And I was like, yeah, okay, great for me.
I actually like that. And I mean, I don't like reading my reviews because, you feel devastated or you feel puffed up. But like what you're saying is kind of, you almost don't recognize your own book. Like, so the tagline for the book might be different. I guess what I'm also asking is this, I think you call it a brand mission statement. Yeah. Which is upper level, which is about you as the author, I guess. Can you talk about brand mission statement?
Sure. You need to know what your brand is before you can market it. It's really simple on that level. And so if you step back and you say, why am I writing this series of books? For me, the retrieval artist, I love murder mysteries and I love space. And so it was set, a murder mystery set on the moon. I'd never seen anybody do that. And then I decided to explore all of mystery in that. So I did different forms. I did, cozy mystery, and then I did detective stories and all of that inside that thing, but murder mystery in space. So there was my mission statement. That's the retrieval artist. It is murder mysteries in space. It's gotten a little bigger than that, but so sometimes it's thrillers in space, but it's still bottom line, murder mysteries in space. The Diving Universe, which is also space opera set in space, it's about exploring vast regions of space. It's very different from the other one. So the mission statements are short and they're easy because that's what you're interested in. My Kristine Kathryn novels are funny, fractured fairy tales. And so there's the mission statement. Whether or not that's a marketing statement is another matter, but as long as I know that that's what the essential part of those series is, I can build from there and I can try to figure out how to make it work. So you guys, when you're writing, you know why you're writing what you're writing, you know what your point is, and you can boil it down to one sentence. It doesn't have to be a snappy, witty sentence. It just has to be a "this is what it is" kind of sentence.
Yeah. That sentence just seems it seems so challenging. I think I need to kind of, like you've said there, those per series, that works. Do you have one at an author name, like this is Kristine Kathryn Rusch is this?
Well, Kristine Kathryn Rusch is all over the map. Really, that's my mission statement. It's all over the map. Kristine Kathryn has to be light. Light and funny, with a little bit of fantasy and a little bit of romance. If I have to think of the tone, it's those 1930s, 1940s romantic comedies with Cary Grant and Irene Dunne and all of those people. It's got to be that kind of snappy thing. Chris Scott is extremely serious and set, in the 1960s. And man, if humor creeps in, I've done something wrong. So I kind of do those by tone. And I can mostly I can figure out what fits into those by tone. And, and there's nothing wrong with all over the map because there are writers. Joyce Carol Oates is another writer who's all over the map. And for readers, go with her there, or not. I mean, with writers who are all over the map, you spend a little more time as a reader looking to see if the book will interest you. Is this one of her books I'm going to like? Is this one of her books that I'm not going to like? Other than that, I mean, it's a handful of readers that'll buy everything when you're all over the map, which is fine as long as you give them a map. You can say, this book I like that book, or this book goes this way. And you do that in design, you do that in your advertising, you do that in your cover copy, and you make it easy for them. You have to step out of your writer's shoes at that point and think about the writers you like to read and the ones who are all over the map. So if you're on your all over the map side of things, you go, what makes me read those books by Joyce Carol Oates and not those? And you figure that out and, the cues, and then you reverse engineer it for your own stuff.
Yeah, I think that kind of modeling and reverse engineering is so important. Like you don't have to figure it out on your own. You can just look at what other people have done. And then,
Yes.
and not copy them, obviously, but modeling it's so important.
And it's good to do it on two levels. You do the modeling on this worked, or the modeling on, wow, that really never worked, and I'm never doing that ever, ever, ever to my readers. And both are valuable.
Yeah, and I just to come back on your short stories, because we're actually doing your short story lecture at the moment, and because you've written so many short stories, it seems far more obvious for a novel length work or even a novella to fit into a clear genre. But short stories don't seem to fit so much, especially when you're writing so many with so many varied genres, subgenres. So where does the brand come in with short stories, or do you just throw it out the window?
With my short stories, for the most part, it's Kristine Kathryn Rusch. So I'm lucky; it's all over the map. And so we just go with the genre when it's done. And when it's done, somebody reads it. Well, Dean reads it, and he's great with genre, so he helps with that. But a lot of times, I write the short stories for a market. I wrote it for Asimov, say, which makes it automatically science fiction, or I wrote it for Clark's World, so it's maybe science fiction and fantasy or steampunk, or I wrote it for one of the mysteries and mystery magazines, or I wrote it for some weird anthology about leprechauns. And occasionally I commit mainstream literary fiction, and those are harder to market because those are harder to write blurbs about, and they're harder to do, but that's kind of a guide for me. But other than that, I just toss the short stories into the all over the map category and let them go.
Okay, no, that's cool. I like all over the map. I think there are lots of us with that tagline. Yeah. So what about if people listening are feeling like they are saddled with a brand they don't want, how can they pivot? How can they, without throwing all the books out, I guess, how can they pivot their brand?
Slowly. They need to figure out what they want to do and how it will market. I know I mentioned in the book there was this woman who wrote to me in great distress a number of years ago because she was writing very funny books with robots, and she was marketing them as chick lit, and the chick lit readers were mad. They were furious. I mean, her tone was chick lit, her books were chick lit, but they had robots. And the chick lit readers did not want robots. And so I told her, you've got to pivot, and you've got to say, this is chick lit with robots, or this is science fiction chick lit, or whatever. And she did, and it worked. But she could have pulled everything down and then started over. Don't do that. You're going to lose all your algorithms. You're going to lose your history. You're going to lose everything else. You guys have been through this with your favorite writers. You've watched it. They move to a different traditional publishing company, and then they rebrand everything. You do that, and you put the new label on it and everything else, and then you do the new cover, and you do it kind of slowly, but you figure out what you're going to do. You had a question when you sent me what we were going to be talking about. One of the things you wanted me to talk about was the difference between brand image and brand identity. And that's where we're coming into right now. And this gets really confusing. Brand image is what everybody else thinks you're writing. What if they were going to define it, or what everybody thinks of you. And brand identity is what you want your brand to be. If you think about it as a human being, brand image is what people say about you when you go out in public. Brand identity is what you think you're doing when you go out in public. You know who you are and what we all grew up. We were all teenagers. We all had that moment where we thought we looked gorgeous. We went out, did this thing, and we just suddenly, oh my goodness, this is like dress failure. This is complete awful. This is not something I should have worn ever. And if you think about it in those terms, brand identity and brand image is when you go out there and you realize everybody's looking at you and they're not looking at you in the way you wanted them to. Your brand image and your brand identity are not consistent. And you also want to really respect that brand image. What I think about it, because I'm old, is that when Coca-Cola decided that they were going to become New Coke, and they put out this Coke product that was completely different from regular Coke, and they got rid of regular Coke. It was the summer of 1986, 85. I remember that because I was at Clarion when it happened, and all the Coke drinkers, I was not one, were really mad. Coke did not taste the same anymore. It
Mm.
just didn't. They were just doing a redesign from the bottom up. And so in came the marketers and saved their butts and said, there's new Coke and then there's regular Coke and everything else. And they went back to old Coke, regular Coke. And they used it as a marketing thing. And now we have, I mean, it's 30 some years later, we have new Coke. People know what that is. That's a marketing thing, but they don't know why it's called new Coke because it's been around 5. And then there's Coke and then there's all this other stuff. It was a save your butt marketing thing from brand image and brand identity, because they had screwed up their brand identity by trying something else and not realized what their brand image was.
Mm. Wow. Now you're saying that, because we recently had an episode with a trans writer, and we were talking about gender in that way. You know, gender being the way that you portray yourself to the world versus, well, what people think you are looking at you and what you feel inside. So when you think about it that way, there's so many different levels of this, and I think that's probably the message out of this episode, I feel, is that there are so many different levels to branding that you kind of really need to think about each of these levels in a different way.
Yeah, and one piece at a time. I would suggest that either you look at the blog post for free on my blog, which is kriswrites.com, and I don't know, because I've had a rough year, I don't know if they're all up there properly, but just Google or search under branding to make sure. I tried to do that anyway, or pick up the book and just go through it. I was actually making people, when I was doing the blog post, I was making people do homework. Go watch this, go do that, go look at this, think about that, and do it. It'll really clarify what you need to do and how to think about it. And I'm going to stress again, do not do this as you're writing.
Yeah, definitely. So now I just want a couple more questions. So one is the life roles thing. So I love that you and Dean Wesley Smith call these things life roles, which is, you're going along, you're doing your writing thing, you thought everything was sorted, and then something happens and everything shifts. So tell us a bit about the life role that's been going on while you've been writing this mega book as well.
Oh, the life role's been going on for quite a while, and we just slowly realized what was happening. I have chronic health issues. I blogged about it a number of times. I have some serious chronic health issues, and I had them under control, I thought. But the town that I lived in was a very small town, and it got narrower and smaller for me because some of the issues I have are allergies, including allergies to fragrance and food allergies. And it was becoming impossible for me to find food to eat, literally, because it couldn't come into the small town. It was impossible for me to go into a restaurant because too many people would be wearing perfume. And I was on the Oregon coast where there's humidity and all the smells would stay. And so I was essentially becoming trapped in my house, which created a whole nother problem because my neighbor, who decided to have a fight with the city, and instead of taking his garbage to the dump or having it picked up, he was burning it in his fireplace. So I was getting so sick that I could hardly get out of bed in the morning. And we realized we had to take a drastic step. We had a 5,000 square foot house there overlooking the Pacific Ocean. We loved it. But we had to get me to a city. And Dean and I had been talking about various cities. We have different requirements about where we live. He can't live in humidity where there's actual heat during the summer. I don't mind. I grew up in that. But, that ruled out like most of the United States. And I'm a very pale-skinned person. And until this last 5 years, there was no sunscreen that I could wear with the fragrance allergy to allow me to be in the desert. Now there's a whole bunch of it. Yay! So we moved to Las Vegas, which is a one-sentence thing that is actually 6 months of work, most of it done by Dean because I couldn't stay up there. But so we've been in transition until just this weekend. He's finally here permanently. He came on Saturday night at 11 o'clock. And he's here permanently. And so we've been moving, we've been dealing with my health. My health has been gradually improving, but I was so sick last year that, my essential focus was get my pages done, exercise, which is what essentially kept me alive, and eat, figure out how to eat something, which if your existence is down to 3 things, that's not a good thing. And I've been coming back, I'm doing better, and I'm getting more energy, and it's been wonderful. But essentially there was this hole in my life. If you look at my career, I'm going along, everything's fine. Crater. Okay, I'm climbing out now, and here I am. I'm back. And this has happened to me before. This happens to everybody. Something dies, you can't work because you're mourning. You get a serious illness. You are caretaking a parent with a serious illness. You have something wonderful happen to you, like you get married, and then you move, and then you're readjusting your life to have this new person, or you have a child. I always tell people who have babies to just take all the pressure off of their writing, because you only get the first 5 years of their life once. So spend that time. And, writers are so go, go, go. They're like, no, I can't do that. And I'm like, no, you do that, because you're never going to get it back. You're going to regret it. Let the writing be secondary or tertiary or something else, because it's really important. There are times when living is much more important than getting pages done and branding and marketing and all of that other stuff. So you've got to figure out when to let your life take priority.
Yeah.
Mine did this year.
Yeah, I think the universe kind of forced it on you, like that neighbor. That was like the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, literally. I mean, I couldn't figure out last year, because he must have started it last year. I couldn't figure out why our property smelled like burning tires all the time. I'm blaming people on the beach. I'm like, why are people out on the beach burning tires?
But there is a real, I think this is awesome, because you now have your workshops in person in Vegas, right?
Yes, we moved them to Las Vegas, which is so much better, because, before 100 years ago, when we started the workshops, which is actually 20 years ago next year, it was in traditional publishing. So we felt that it took a lot of effort to get to the Oregon coast. You had to fly into Portland, you had to drive over a mountain, for heaven's sakes. You had to, stay in this tiny town. And that was kind of a metaphor for traditional publishing. If you really wanted it, you needed to come to this location, because you had to go through all these, barriers to get there. Well, there's no more barriers to publishing. You can just put up your book. You can be an indie published writer. So it's kind of metaphorical that we're now in Las Vegas, where everybody on the planet can fly here easily and relatively cheaply. We are doing a whole bunch. I'm really excited about all of these workshops that we're doing in person here, because we're modifying them, we're changing them up. We had to have a lot of rules at the previous ones, because we were in this small town, and the liability issues were on us, not on like the hotel. So if somebody got drunk and trashed the hotel, we were responsible instead of the hotel. Well, we're in Las Vegas now. People get drunk and trash the hotel all the time. So we don't have to have things like no drinking rules and stuff at night. You can go out. Yes, you can go have a beer if you want to, which is really nice. You can go relax with friends, and we're building time in for that. We're building, stuff there are so many opportunities in this city. When people come to visit, and everybody comes to visit, I let them pick where we're going to go. And I've gone to a bunch of places I would not have normally gone to. So I'm like, wow, I can use this in my mystery class. They can do this. There's a few blocks from where I am now. There's a mob museum, which sounds like it's all about the mob, but it's not. It's all about crime and criminology, and they have a CSI exhibit and stuff. And I'm like, oh, I can use that to make assignments, or I can do this, or I can do that. Or instead of me trying to say, read this book to illustrate this point, I can take them there and say, here, this is what it looks like, hands-on. So it's going to be really exciting. We're doing craft workshops there. The first workshop that we're doing is a business workshop, which is the one you've been to, the business masterclass. And we're bringing in people from nearby, because we have to figure out the cost. Still, we're still learning how, it's going to work here. So we're bringing it, but nearby is, Los Angeles and Arizona, and people from Utah, all that stuff. So there's all kinds of experts that we can bring in that we didn't have before, that are easy to bring in. So we're changing that up and making that different. And it's very exciting.
It is really exciting. And I think I've moved countries a lot, like continents, and like I always find moving a real thing that kind of helps you almost move into a new phase of your life. So, and I'm really excited about Vegas. So great move. And I just have one final question, because like we talked a year ago, and then you came on the show once before, like before that. And I'd really just like to know, like, your thoughts on right now, state of indie. Where are we in the state of indie as we talk in 2018? You know, do you feel we're still in the toddler stage? Are we in the angry adolescent stage? Are we getting anywhere near maturity? Because some days I think we are, and other days I think, no way, we've barely started.
I think we are near maturity, but not in the way that you mean. It's more that the systems are in place, the scammers are here, so that, it's really easy to get tripped up, and you want to publish a book, and so you're going to pay somebody $10,000 to do it, and they're not going to do anything. Those people have arrived, and when those people arrive, then you know that this is a more established business. It's not the Wild West anymore. It's not the gold rush kind of stuff. It can be, but it's going to be a lot trickier for somebody coming in new to establish themselves like you and I did. But we were kind of inventing the wheel. And so those of us who've been in here a long time, India's not been around a long time, but long enough, every now and then we get startled. We go, oh, we don't have to invent that wheel anymore. Somebody's done. The inverse of the scammers coming in is that the programmers have also come in and said, I want to do this easy. I don't want this to be hard. I want to have it, 3 snaps of my fingers and it's done. And that's here too. And there are systems that used to work that don't work anymore, which is all part of an established market. It's not an old market. It's not a mature market, but it's established. And so there will be changes, but there's not going to be anything that's going to come in and, completely disrupt us anymore. That's going to, make us even if Amazon goes down, it's not going to completely disrupt us, because there are other platforms. And so, we're in a completely different phase than we were 2, 3, 4 years ago. And certainly very different from 10 years ago when, everybody was going, well, you can upload a Word file and people will read it.
And the first Kindle millionaires were indeed people who uploaded Word files for like 99 cents or whatever, and there was nothing else on the Kindle store. Yes, all those are the days. But no, very exciting. I'm really looking forward to like you and Dean being in Vegas. It's very exciting. And if people want to get the book, Creating an Author Brand, so where can people find you and everything you do online, Kris?
You can find me at my messy website, which is kriswrites.com. All this stuff I've been talking to you guys about, I've had a website, speaking of from the beginning, I've had one since 1997. And so it has all of its problems that are coming with that. So don't use my website as an example of how to do things, but you can find out information there. Sign up for my newsletter. It's kriswrites.com, KRISWRITES.com. And that'll lead you to other websites and everything else. And, and my books are available on all the platforms. I believe in going wide. So you can find them in audiobook and ebook and print book. This one's not an audio yet because I face planted this year, but it will be. And so, you can find me everywhere.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, Kris. That was great.
Thank you, Joanna. Thanks for asking me.